And so what we saw after October 7th was our nation that was really actually quite divided politically and culturally prior to the war. All of a sudden, the whole nation rallied together. In times of crisis, this happens. And that happened as well for the believing community. Jewish believers in Jesus, Christian Arabs. We started working together, and when we worked together and also had the support of millions and millions of Christians all around the world, we were able to make a disproportionate impact on society.
Welcome everyone to another show. My name is Josh Doyle. I'm the host of No Longer Nomads, and I'm so thankful you're here today. I've got an incredible guest today. His name is Michael Mistretta. He leads Firm Ministries, which you'll hear all about, which helps partner with over 70 ministries and organizations in Israel to help reach the Jewish people with the gospel. Michael, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Josh. It's fun to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about why you came over to Israel. I know that's a longer story, but feel free to jump in why the Lord called you to Israel with a family.
I don't know why the Lord called me, but I know why I went. I grew up thinking I love the Lord, and I thought I was going to live in America and do business and send money to the missions field, originally being from Canada. And God just turned my life upside down. I ended up selling my company, hearing very clearly the Lord saying I was going to spend the rest of my life living and doing ministry in Jerusalem. As a 17-year-old, I heard that. So that was quite decisive. I was very happy God was that clear with me. And I just was crazy enough to say, I don't know any Israelis. I don't really know any Jewish people, but I'm going to go. And long story short, I sold everything, bought a one-way ticket, moved out to Israel, ended up finding out that my grandmother was Jewish, had no idea. All my grandparents were born in Italy, Southern Italy and Sicily. And I went to Italy, was able to prove it, was able to make Aliyah, immigrate to Israel. And then I got connected with a pastor in Jerusalem that had been pastoring for decades. And we teamed up together 10 years ago this month, actually, to start Firm. That stands for Fellowship of Israel-Related Ministries. I met my now wife, Vanessa, at that launch conference 10 years ago. And so it's just been one step of obedience after another, and seeing God open up the doors for us to do what we get to do in Israel.
That's incredible. So tell us about Firm.
Yeah, so we have a passion to see a day where every person in Israel is transformed by the love of Yeshua or Jesus. We do that primarily by serving the local body, by helping to strengthen, unite, and resource local ministries. You said it. We have a network of about 75 different congregations and ministries, doing everything from helping women off the street, or helping drug addicts, or discipling young people, or supporting people in need all across the country, from the north to the south. We're based in Jerusalem, but the ministries are all over. And our heart is to be a servant organization. Basically come alongside and say, God's given you a vision. We want to help to accelerate it. We want to help you get healthy and strong. We want to help you think collaboratively. How can we work together? And we want to actually resource you to do what God's called you to do. And what many people don't realize is, of course, Israel's the place where most of the biblical account happened, and most of the biblical authors were Jewish people. And of course, this is where all of the gospel events took place. And then it went all around the world. And yet, statistically, Israel is really still an unreached people group. Less than a third of 1% of our population says that they believe in Yeshua, Jesus, as the Messiah. And not only that, the 99.7% that don't believe he's Messiah, it's also a very hated thing to be a Jewish person that believes in Yeshua and Jesus. Some would say you're worse than a Nazi because you've killed the soul of a Jew. And so we're trying to reverse that narrative. We're trying to be the hands and feet of Jesus here in Israel. We're trying to help serve our people, not as people that come from the outside, but as Israelis, as Jewish Israelis, saying, how can we love, how can we bless, how can we serve, how can we destigmatize who Yeshua is? Not the God of the Christians, but the Jewish Messiah who was born, descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, here in this land, that observed the Torah and was called to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
Wow. So when you started Firm till now, are you seeing a different type of landscape out there? Are there people that are much more open and receptive to the gospel now? And maybe even off of the heels of October 7th, are you seeing more receptivity? People that are interested in Yeshua, are you seeing that at all?
Definitely. It's a night and day difference than 10 years ago. First of all, 10 years ago, there were a lot of ministries and congregations doing things, but often we weren't working together. And that was our heart, is saying, if we're only a fraction of 1% of the population, well, for us to make a real impact, we have to work together. Obviously, this was Jesus' heart and his prayer, saying, Father, may they be one as you and I are one, that the world may believe that we sent them. And so that's something we've seen shift just in the last 10 years of Firm. We've spent a lot of time building a lot of trust here. And if you've ever been to the Middle East or Middle Eastern cultures, of course, Josh, you have. But if the viewers have been, you understand it's a very, very relational place, the Middle East. You don't start with transactions. You start with relationship. You start with sipping a cup of tea or having a coffee or going over to someone's home. And as you build that trust, then things can start moving more quickly. We move at the speed of trust. And so what we saw after October 7th was our nation that was really actually quite divided politically and culturally prior to the war. All of a sudden, the whole nation rallied together. In times of crisis, this happens. And that happened as well for the believing community. Jewish believers in Jesus, Christian Arabs. We started working together. And when we worked together and also had the support of millions and millions of Christians all around the world, we were able to make a disproportionate impact on society. We were able to collectively touch hundreds and hundreds of thousands, I believe even millions of Israelis, and we're only a nation of 10 million people. As a small community, but because we worked together. And one of the most amazing things that started to happen is we realized we were so used to expecting to have doors slammed in our faces. When we would talk to a mayor or to a municipal leader or to a federal leader or to just a secular Israeli, typically we kind of walk on eggshells because as soon as they realize you believe in Yeshua, typically doors would have slammed in our faces. Yeah. And after October 7th, that entire narrative shifted because people said, wow, you're here, you're one of us, you're here to serve. The door is open. So we're very open about who we are, and God opened up the door for us to house 1,500 displaced people from ultra-Orthodox backgrounds that realized, wow, Jewish believers and Christians are helping us. So we had some of the food boxes that we did all through our partners distributed into Bnei Brak, which is one of the most strict ultra-Orthodox communities in Tel Aviv. The rabbi had to sign off on these boxes that said, we're here to love our neighbor, just as Yeshua instructed us to. And then we started working with government leaders that the doors flung wide for us to build schools and help build protective shelters and help to build community centers. And now we're even working on homes for those who've lost their homes. So it's stuff we never before imagined, but really that opens up the door for us to build relationships with people that we've never had before. And once you have a relationship, like everything else in this land, then people want to know about the hope that you have, about the security you have in a time of so much uncertainty. And now we're seeing people not just open to the message of Yeshua, but actually engaging, studying more, opening up the scriptures, and several also even coming to know him as Messiah. So I think we'll look back on history and see really a tipping point starting from October 7th with how believers in Israel are perceived. And if people can begin to believe that you're not a traitor, you're not the enemy, maybe he could be the Messiah. Well, that's the first step that's needed for more discovery, more searching. And we know what God promised the Jewish people. If you search for me, you'll find me if you search with your whole heart.
Amen. So good. So, we're talking about October 7th. I would love to hear your story, your experience on October 7th. Our audience is a bunch of young families, a lot of them with kids that are, probably not even into their teenage years and probably couldn't even imagine being in a situation like you were on October 7th. And so if you could share with us, I'm sure our viewers at this point know what happened, of course, but if you could share with us what happened to you and your family, how you're trying to lead them and also lead a ministry as well.
So we We were in the U.S. and we were flying back to Israel on October 6th. We were actually the last United flight that landed before everything happened. We didn't know, of course. We went home, hosted a Shabbat dinner, and went to sleep that night. Now it's my wife Vanessa, myself, and then we have 2 boys. Back then they were 2 and 6 months, 7 months.
Wow.
So very, very, very young. And we went to sleep and woke up to the sound of sirens. And we were in Jerusalem. So in Jerusalem, you're not used to getting sirens. I mean, that's a pretty long-range rocket to reach Jerusalem. And the sirens didn't stop. They kind of kept going for hours and hours and hours. We woke up and you're supposed to run to the bomb shelter. I ran outside. I was just like, what's going on? We're seeing Iron Dome take things out of the air. And we're kind of glued to the news. I mean, it's Shabbat, so a lot of people are not on their phones, but we're reading the news and we hear, oh, maybe Hamas terrorists have infiltrated the country. And then we hear, oh, maybe there was 30 or 50 of them came in the country. We were thinking, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And then we started hearing about people being killed, 10, 20, 30, 50. Already we were thinking, this is the worst terrorist attack in modern history that we've experienced.
Yeah.
Then I remember where I was at on my computer when there was this rumor being spread that they had taken hostages. And we're like, that can't be true. It's propaganda. It's a lie. And I remember when I read that they found a baby crying in a crib with none of his parents there. And my heart just sank thinking, oh my gosh, this is true. And so we went to sleep that night, not even understanding what had happened. The next morning was almost worse because we woke up on October 8th and we realized all of the images, all of our Instagrams and our Facebooks and our TikToks were all filled with the images of people being taken hostage. I mean, people at that point hadn't even really known what was going on. Everyone was in lockdown in their bomb shelters if you were down south.
Yeah.
And I remember we went into our office on Sunday morning, which is a work day in Israel. And I wanted to just go to our weekly prayer meeting with our team. And we didn't even know how to lead the prayer meeting. So emotional. Everyone was in shock. And we just said, God, would you use us to be your hands and your feet and to shine a light? And let's lean into relationship. Let's call our partners, see how they're doing, see what they need. And we just started to run. We had no plan, no strategy, just how do we help? Later that day, I got a call from someone saying, hey, we want to get on a plane and help you start a kitchen feeding thousands of hot meals a day. I said, great. I'll find you a kitchen. We found a kitchen in a place called the Baptist Village and got a rabbi to certify it as kosher. Crazy.
Wow.
Started doing 2,000 hot meals a day. Someone else said, I want to give you a hotel to host displaced families. Can you run it? I'm like, I don't know, but sure.
We'll figure it out.
And we just started hearing what the needs were. And I really wanted to go down to the Gaza border. And at this point, we were 2 days into the war. There are still terrorists in the country. Now,
I remember that.
To give the stats, we thought 50, 60, 70. There were 3,000 terrorists that had entered, 1,200 people killed, 251 taken hostage. And I was on the night of October 9th, I was like ready to go down. And my wife and our team literally had to physically restrain me from driving down. They said, wait till tomorrow. So 6 a.m. on October 10th, I woke up, went down to the Gaza border. There were family members of some of our staff that were in lockdown, like hearing terrorists out on the street. So we went and we were like the first people they had seen in 3 days that weren't terrorists. And we're opening up their bomb shelters and they're like, we need water and we need generators and we need all this kind of stuff. So we're just like, we're here to help. And that opened up the door one by one to start serving communities and people. And so to put this in context, if we're talking about young families, I just started running. I think all of us cope differently, and I definitely cope by doing. But at the same time, schools were shut down. No one else. We didn't know if Hezbollah was going to attack in the north. We didn't know if other people would get involved. It was very scary. And honestly, I kind of left my family to just go show up and be there. And during the day, we were serving and buying things and helping people and helping partners. And at night, I was just on podcasts and on television shows and, with American prime time. And I'd go to sleep at 5 a.m. and wake up 2 hours later and do it all again. And that was the rhythm. And so it definitely cost us. I mean, 3 months later, we look back and realize, wow, that was hard for my wife. She was home with the kids. She wanted to be by my side. And yet,
of course.
there was no school Finally, we got some childcare figured out, like a little home daycare we created because the schools were closed. Had to be close to a bomb shelter, and we just started going after it together. And you know what I really realized as well is in the country, I was at the time I was 30 years old, and everyone my age, every man my age, essentially was called up to reserves. About 350 to 400,000 men were called up. Again, in a country of less than 10 million people.
Yeah.
And so there was this unknown pressure that I felt. And I'm like, wow, I'm not called up to the reserves. Why? I immigrated slightly after military age to Israel, and so I never served in the military. So I just felt like, man, everyone else has left their families. I get to go home to my family every night. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to serve harder. I'm going to show up. And that pressure really was costly. And you could live like with that kind of adrenaline for a week or 2 or maybe 3, but it starts to catch up on you. I remember we were a week in, and I'm thinking we're going to get these hostages back in the next week or 2. Like And here we are a year and a half later, and we're
almost
still
500
fighting
days.
over a 10-month-old at the time. Fear, him being released in this latest hostage deal. It's still this struggle. And this hits close to home because the 2 children who are still hostage in Gaza, Ariel and Kfir Bibas, they're very, very close to my son's age. Kfir, the youngest, he was born 1 month before my youngest son.
Wow.
And Ariel is almost a year older than my eldest son. So every time I look at them and they're playing, I'm thinking, man, Kfir, if he's alive, he learned to walk in Gaza. He celebrated his first and his second birthday in Gaza. He probably learned to speak the Arabic that was being spoken around. Like it's unreal to think about that and the toll that it's taken on families. So that's a little bit of our story. I mean, we're not that we're different. Everyone in some way was wanting to serve, wanting to help, and it's created a vast amount of post-trauma. I saw a study just this week that came out saying over 40% of adults in Israel are suffering from PTSD effects of some kind, and about 10% are suffering from severe symptoms of PTSD. So that just gives you a little bit of a grid of what we're facing.
Man, it's just heartbreaking on so many levels. And you guys were, man, you snapped into action and you were documenting it. Man, I saw so much that you guys were posting. And actually, you guys inspired us to come out to Israel. You guys had done a Hope and Healing tour. You were starting to promote it and say, come to Israel. I was thinking, I didn't even know you could go. And so I asked a few people from my team, hey, do you guys want to go? And within a few weeks, we were in Israel. And dude, I've been to Israel over 30 times. And that time is the most personal, most life-changing experience I've had in Israel. There are people stopping in the streets, coming up to us, giving us hugs, crying. It means everything that you're here to support us. We were sitting with the mayor and one of the municipalities down there, and he said, you being here is enough. You being here and standing with us is enough. And so you guys led the charge and still are leading the charge. And so, like I said, you inspired us to come out there. So we talked about the bigger picture of what happened on October 7th.
Josh, it was kind of a crazy story. Like the week after, we had people texting us, can we come volunteer? I'm like, what are you talking about? No. They're like, how can I help? I'm like, I don't know. Send money. I don't know. We don't even know how to help. And about a month in, we were like, maybe we can do something. But it was the beginning of November. I'm thinking Christmas is coming. If we don't announce something now, like it's just not happening this year. And so I met with our team, and our team was like, we should do it. We should open up a trip. So we opened up a trip November 7th for December 1st. We had 3 weeks. And we had 80 people from 10 different countries sign up, and they showed up. And it was, like you said, it was just very impactful for people to come at that time. I mean, they got to go into some secure military zones where, you were just still smelt the smell of death.
Oh, 100%.
They were still cleaning up remains and ashes, and it's a huge testimony. And honestly, I'll say this, Josh. What happened on that trip opened up the door for us to have fresh relationships with different regional councils and municipalities, because we
I'm
did
sure.
a serve day, and it was the
Yeah.
international Christians plus the local body together that it purchased relational equity for us.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to encourage people. And I know you guys are like, this is your heart as well, is when people come and they connect and they like, it's not just a trip. It's not like I'm just here for 10 days.
Right.
If you're doing it in partnership with the local body, you're leaving behind not just a legacy, but you're helping to expand our influence. And that's really what we need. It's like we would have had a fraction of the influence if it wasn't for Christians that were our friends, that were supporting us, helping us, praying, believing, coming, serving. And so that's a huge testament. I remind people of that. Without the international Christian support, our ability to actually reach our people would be very much minimized.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we talked about the, kind of bigger picture. Let's zoom in a bit. I want to ask you, what was a moment, whether you saw it or you saw it on your phone, was there a moment that just stuck out with you? Like for me, I mean, seeing the lady with her 2 babies, you're just talking about them. In Cedar Road, there was a Hamas vehicle that came up on a family of 2 young kids, and you see one of the 2-year-olds running back and forth on the street right after her dad got shot, looking for help. I mean, that one to me broke me, because I had a 2-year-old at the time. I thought, man, that could be me. And you see the dad come up, he's helpless, and he tries to, kind of help. It's just, so heartbreaking. What was that moment for you? I'm sure there was many. Was there one that sticks out to you the most?
Yeah. There was a moment, maybe a weekend. In all this time, I felt emotional, but it was very hard to grieve. There was a moment, a weekend, where we felt led to launch a prayer campaign for the hostages. It was called Pray for Israel by Name, and we were taking the names of hostages and writing them on our hands. And I look back, and we were filming this video maybe 4 or 5 days into the war, and we launched it a week into, it was crazy how fast we put this out. But we had tens of thousands of Christians around the world putting hostage names in their hands, praying. And I was filming the video, and we were basing it off of Isaiah 49, where the Lord said, I've inscribed you in the palms of my hand. You believe you've been forgotten, forsaken, but he says, no, I have not forgotten you. Your name's inscribed in the palm of my hands. And I finished quoting that scripture, and I finished the video, and both me and the girl who was filming on her phone this video, we just burst out crying. We just, I finished the video, took a breath, and we were just bawling. Yeah. Just so emotional. And I remember the first time we went down south to these villages, Be'eri, was less than a month in, and seeing and hearing and feeling. But honestly, Josh, I'll just say, I didn't have a really, really emotional moment for about a year. And then when we were together in Dallas in November at the event we hosted there, I remember I came downstairs right before the gala, and I knew what we had designed, this exhibition, and kind of remembering Be'eri, but I came down, people were still setting up, and I saw everything, and I saw the table of all the hostages. I've seen that a million times, right? A million times. And it just hit me in a moment. I started weeping uncontrollably, and I couldn't stop. No, I just couldn't stop. It was just, and it took a while for the emotions to catch up, because when you're moving fast, it's kind of like a coping mechanism in its own way. But you just, all of a sudden, you're like, you're able to feel and grieve. And we all need that. We all need the ability to do that.
Wow. So, what's it like today? Obviously, there's still needs. Are there still displaced families in hotels all over there? If they're still there. Could you imagine being in a hotel with your family?
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible.
Dog and all. That'd be terrible.
We were moving 2 years ago. We had to spend 2 weeks in a hotel with our 2 little boys. It was horrendous.
Get me out of here.
And we had 2 connecting rooms, not all in one room. Yeah. So, the emergency needs have mostly gone away, but there's still a lot of needs. There's still tens of thousands of northern residents that have been displaced. Maybe they're going to move back into their homes, but a lot of their homes are destroyed. And our government, God bless them, they're not really quick to move on repairing. And so this is one of the things we're working on right now, is helping to rebuild hopefully a village of about 50 homes up right on the border with Lebanon. Help these families move back. And the goal right now is that school, most of these families will stay through the school year through June. But after June, we want to have these homes ready for them to move back. So there's situations like that. There's still people that are losing loved ones. One of our dear friends, actually right before this, I was on a memorial call for one of our friends who his eldest son was serving in the military, and all of a sudden they got the call that no one wants to get, that he had passed. And so they're reeling from that.
Yeah.
There's also the reality of the lingering trauma in so many people that it doesn't go away, like I just said.
Yeah.
So there's long-term needs, there's short-term needs, there's security needs. And so we're still saying, God, how can we help in all of these different areas? Hopefully this year we're going to be working collaboratively with the body in a really creative way to do trauma healing care in a way that's going to, I believe, fuel the next decades of us being able as believers to show the hope that we have.
Absolutely.
But I want to answer your question about the situation right now. Everyone is texting us, oh, is it good that there's a ceasefire? And it is good that there's a ceasefire. I mean, we've been able to go to sleep and not wake up with rocket attacks from Yemen. We're living in a place right now where all the Yemen ballistic missiles, they pass over us when they target Tel Aviv. And it's really great because we have all these missile systems that shoot them down. Yeah, it just so happens they shoot them down literally over our head, and all of the shrapnel lands right near us. We woke up in the morning, one of our neighbors had a shrapnel of a missile in their roof, just 1 street over. The next day it was on the main road right outside our door. So, it's nice not to wake up in the middle of the night and run to a bomb shelter, down, 4 flights of stairs to a bomb shelter. Yep. But the uncertainty of, are the hostages coming home? Is this deal being done? What are the condition they're in? Oh, they look like Holocaust survivors coming out of Gaza. Hearing the stories of what they've been through. And now this uncertainty, from when we're recording this, just a couple days, do we have a hostage deal? Do we not? Are we going back to war? So that's very emotionally taxing as well. And it's frustrating that we're, a year and a half in and we still have over 70 hostages being held in Gaza.
It's crazy. 495 days, I think, is today. So almost 500 days removed from October 7th. So other than Yeshua, where do you find hope right now for the future for the hostages? I mean, where does your team find hope? I mean, how do you lead an organization when you're just, like you said, there's PTSD, and not just for all the Israelis, of course, for you and your team, I'd imagine as well, because you experienced it. You're going through it daily still. Where do you find your hope? Well, we have the hope, of course, in the Word of God, but we actually see it lived out. We're seeing with our own eyes the way that us being able to be here and demonstrate love and care is a healing balm to people. Yeah. Now, it's like comforting anyone else who mourns. You don't have all the answers and you're not able to solve all the problems. But what you can do is you can show up and you can be present, you can be there, you can empathize. And maybe you can build enough of a relationship where people start to say, well, what do you feel certainty in? Everyone's faith was shaken, not just in God, but in the government, our military, our intelligence. And now people are looking for where do I put my trust? Where do I put my hope? Right. And that's huge. I would also say I'm encouraged just being around our kids. They're aware of what's going on. And my eldest son Azariah asks me almost every day, are they coming back home? And are these bad guys? And it's so hard to hear your children, talking about rockets and war and bad guys and do they want to kill us? So difficult. But I see the hope and the light in their eyes. And it encourages me. Today I was driving. I was down in the Gaza border area, and there's a main road there, the 232. And I was driving on the road and just thinking, as we drove past different landmarks, I knew the stories from October 7th of what happened here and the hundreds of people that were killed here, and then the way the Lord saved people here. And I'm driving, and then I'm looking around and I'm seeing kids playing, farmers pulling up crops. Yep. And I'm just saying, wow, God, I'm triggered even driving down here, being in Sderot, right on the border. And yet I see how just in a matter of a year and a half, also, life is able to move on and God's brought healing and hope and people go back to their lives. So that's also encouraging to realize we don't have to stay in the reality of October 7th. Of course we want to remember it. Of course we never want to forget what happened. We don't want it to happen again.
but we also have to be able to move on with our lives and to be able to celebrate God's goodness, even in the midst of a challenging season.
So good. I remember that being in Israel in December of 23, like just the Israeli spirit, like life had carried on. And
it's like a very resilient thing,
Resilience. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So,
I'll tell one quick story on
go
this.
ahead.
So October
Please.
1st of this past year, we had an attack from Iran. This is the second. So it's
I remember that. Yep.
Something that had never happened prior to a year from now, like a year ago, it never happened before. It's unprecedented. All of a sudden became a normal thing. Oh yeah, Iran's attacking us again.
Yeah, again.
and the next day, crazy attack, and I could tell the story. I was out driving and rockets over my head and the Iron Dome firing up in front, like it was crazy. But the next day we woke up, everything was open, everyone went shopping. It was a big holiday the next night. And 24 hours later, we're all like celebrating the Jewish New Year, the Feast of Trumpets. And I'm just like, we're at the grocery store 12 hours after the attack arguing about who gets to buy the steaks.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like,
that's funny.
It's so crazy. It's surreal that we just experienced the largest ballistic missile attack in the history of humanity. And then 12 hours later, we're at the grocery store. We're like, what are we going to get for dinner, right? So that's
I don't think we could do that in the West
resilience.
Here. Yeah, I don't think Americans would come out for weeks.
No, of course not.
Yeah, man. So I would love to know about this documentary you're doing. Share as much as you can or as little as you want, whatever. But it's an incredible, from what I've heard, incredible documentary. Excited to hear about that. When is it coming out? Would love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, so we decided we wanted to tell some of this story that I've been telling here today.
Yeah.
To tell the story of what happened on October 7th, but also to do it through a biblical lens of what God promises in Isaiah 61. He says, comfort those who mourn in Zion. He says, I will bestow on them beauty instead of ashes. And literally, October 7th, we're talking about literal ashes. Like they picked up ashes of people who had been burned alive and horrible things had been done to them. And
Crazy.
And it's still tragic, but we believe that God is doing something beautiful even in the midst of ashes. So we called it Beauty for Ashes. And the trailer is out on YouTube right now. You can look up Beauty for Ashes film, Firm. And we're hoping to launch this in the next couple months. We just did the first screening here in Jerusalem and have this screened in. Our dream is to have this screened in hundreds and hundreds of churches all over America, all around the world, to help educate people with what happened. But there's a lot of things out there that show what happened. But typically it's very dark and gruesome. And we wanted something that you can show in a church that ties in the message of Yeshua, that shows the light, that shows how the believing community rallied together and showed just the beginning of what God started to do.
Yeah.
And we hope this will be a great tool for people. If you don't even know any of the history of the Middle East, which hopefully if you're listening to this podcast, that's not you, but you might have friends that have no idea when we throw around terms like the 6-Day War or, the West Bank, what that means. This is designed to be a film where people can learn in the course of, 50 minutes, a lot of the history and be able to see it lived out in a practical way.
Amazing. Wow. I can't wait to see that. So, what's a message you would have for our audience listening? And I'm sure you've got, I'll let you think about that as I, kind of tee it up further, but you probably go a lot. Is it come? Is it support? Is it, watch this film? What is your message to people, believers around the world that are saying, how can I help? Maybe I can't go right now. What can I do to help out the people in Israel right now?
Yeah. My number one message would be, don't let your opinion or knowledge or engagement with Israel and the Middle East be what you read in the headlines. Because if it's only what you read in the headlines, you're missing out. You're missing a lot of things. And I would say two things. One, we have to look at things through a biblical and spiritual lens. We have to understand this is not a geopolitical issue. This is a spiritual war. It's a spiritual battle. The Bible says we don't wage war against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. And these are powers and principalities that go back generations, centuries, millennia, this hatred for the Jewish people. So we have to have a spiritual and biblical understanding. We have to say, God, I want to love what you love, and I want your heart for this region of the world. not just Israel, the Jewish people, but this region so near and dear to the heart of God. It's where our heritage comes from as believers. It's where the biblical narrative took place.
Yeah.
And at the same time, not just only have a biblical perspective, but also have a perspective that's connected with believers on the ground in the land right now.
Yeah.
Why? Because if we only have a biblical perspective, then you start talking about things from a very end times prophecy way that's devoid of human emotion. Oh yeah, I heard that a third of Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, and all these people are going to be killed, and you say that with a smile on your face because you don't actually know the people living there.
Right.
And I think people that have a biblical lens but don't actually have real relationships often struggle to engage in an emotionally mature and appropriate way. And so I really believe we can do a little less with the headlines, less with the very abrupt narratives and the trigger words and clickbait. Yep. And if we have a biblical perspective, but we also combine it with relationships with those in this area, and that could be a relationship with what you guys are doing with Uncharted, a relationship with us, a relationship with believers, but real relationship. I think that's the true power of us being able to live as Jesus would have us to live in the days that we're living in.
That's amazing. Wow. So I'd love to jump into the hostage situation for a sec. And I know we were talking about it before we started rolling. So what are your thoughts? I know. So this episode will come out after this Saturday, but Trump had said you have till Saturday at noon or all hell will break loose. I mean, and then yet he's like, of course Netanyahu can override me.
If it doesn't come out because the world ended, now you know. Trump was right.
Who knows? This episode may not air. But what are your thoughts? What's the thoughts of the Israelis with this? And actually I'll say this before I get to that. We talked to someone who is a Nova Festival survivor, and he was saying, for the first time, we're starting to see hostages coming back again, after Trump got, sworn into the office. So what is the, feeling like in Israel, and also your personal take on it as well?
Yeah, the majority of people here want our hostages to come home. Every week there are protests and rallies for the hostages. Obviously, it's a very complicated situation. It's very emotional because every one hostage that's coming home, we have to release 30 to 50 Palestinian prisoners, many of them who have life sentences to prison for other terrorist attacks that they perpetrated. So imagine for a second, you want the hostages to come home, and you're a family that lives in central Israel. Your brother was killed in a terrorist attack 20 years ago, and you get a call from the government saying, hey, this Saturday, we're releasing your brother's murderer along with 49 other people in exchange for one Israeli civilian woman who was taken from her home so we can get her back. So now you tell me how you'd feel if you were that family and you felt like you had gotten justice for your brother's death and now he's being let go.
Wow, what an interesting...
That's the dilemma that people are facing right now. So everyone wants the hostages to come home. Some feel like it's not worth the price.
Yeah.
Here's the other factor you have to understand. The man who planned and architected October 7th, Yahya Sinwar, he was released by Israel in one of these prisoner swaps almost 10 years ago. When we traded 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for one Israeli soldier who was held hostage in Gaza. So imagine the thought, wow, we're setting free the people that are going to plan the terrorist attacks that our sons and our daughters are going to encounter in 5, 10, 15 years. So that's the dilemma that we're facing. So anyone in Israel that's like wanting to go back to war, it's because they don't like what Hamas is doing. They don't like that we're trickling out hostages, 3 here, 2 there, not letting family members know if their people are alive. They have to wonder and guess. Hamas has been faking the death of some of the hostages as well. And so it's really a tragic situation.
Hello, you still there? Looks like we lost him. Oh, man. Yep. Okay. So Nathan, we'll obviously cut this. Man, I've had a migraine. Just pounding this interview. He'll probably come on. Maybe his computer died. If not, I'll do an outro. Oh, here he is.
Hey man, I'm so sorry.
Gotcha.
Like
You're good. You're good.
My internet died. I don't know.
That's all
where
good.
exactly you lost me.
I lost you right as you were going into, let's see, you were talking about just a prisoner swap, and 5 to 10 years later, I mean, these kids that are now going to have to deal with this as well.
Yeah. So I'll comment one last thing and we'll move on.
Sure.
So that's the dilemma that so many people in our country are facing is everyone wants the hostages out, but we don't want to perpetuate the problem. And Hamas is releasing 2 or 3 prisoners at a time in horrible conditions, not letting us know if some prisoners are alive or dead, faking that some of the hostages have died. One of the girls, Danielle, who was freed, they made her fake her own death. Literally on video. She resisted, but they covered her with blood and made her fake her own death to do psychological warfare and terrorism to her family. Later, she comes out totally alive. So we don't know what to believe. We don't know what's true, what's not true. And what Trump is doing right now is he's really calling the bluff of a lot of the Hamas leaders because he's unpredictable enough that to make some people second guess. I think we're witnessing a massive negotiation showdown happening of global proportions on a global scale, right? That's encouraging. I think most Israelis feel very supported by Trump. Even we don't know really what to do with him and what's going to happen, but I think we feel movement like we haven't felt in over a year.
Wow. That's interesting. I never thought about that dilemma before. I mean, I did see that picture of Sinwar getting released, and it's like, man, he's the one that masterminded October 7th. You think, sheesh.
Not only that, Josh, he had a brain tumor while in Israeli prisons.
Oh, yeah.
And our Israeli hospitals and doctors removed the tumor and saved his life. And then we released him back to Gaza. Can you believe that? This man that architected the murder of thousands of Israelis.
That's just sick. Just so evil. I mean, it just like pure hatred for the Jewish people. So someone listening is playing devil advocate right now. They're saying, okay, but isn't the terrorists on the brink of collapse? How could they actually muster up and fight after this, in years to come? What would your take be there? Because, I mean, you look at a lot of cities, wow, they're wiped out, but man, there's still a lot of people there.
Yeah, I think all of us, the Israeli government's saying we really dismantled Hamas, but then we see the footage coming out of these hostage releases, and you see Hamas terrorists, like 10 of them in a car holding up their guns. They don't look pretty wiped out to us. And I've had multiple Israelis say to me, you know how hard it is to watch that after over a year of fighting and to see them acting victorious? It's a psychological thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big question now is, what do you do with Gaza? And I think most people in the world are saying, how do we clean up the problem, rebuild? But the real question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we resolve this and really have a solution that's not going to perpetuate itself in another 10 years? I mean, what's the point of rebuilding everything if it's just going to happen again? And so that's really what's being worked out now. And I think Trump is anchoring the world with some pretty radical ideas, partially to get people to think of some fresh ideas. People have been repeating the same ideas for 70 plus years. And if the ideas were going to be good and work, they would have worked 70 years ago.
They would have worked. Yeah.
So we need some fresh thinking. And I think that's what's encouraging to me, is that Trump is forcing people to think a little bit more outside the box.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. Well, let's see. Where can people find you? Where can people find more about Firm? And any other final thoughts you would want to share with the audience? Yeah,
well, I just appreciate that people would even want to know what's happening in our region. It's very, very humbling and really quite special knowing people are praying for us and lifting up our arms. And it's such an encouragement to us, truly. So thanks to you, Josh, and your family and everything you guys have done for us. And also just for getting the word out and the message out and the truth out. That means more than you can know. You can find out more about us on our website, firmisrael.org. So FIRM, Israel.org. Also on social media, every channel at Firm Israel. We try to post stuff and really just highlight the local body and see what God's doing in the midst of all of this stuff. So we're feel like we're living out of the headlines, we're living out of the biblical prophecies, and yet at the same time, we're also writing history because God chooses to work through us. And so I hope people will start coming back. It's not scary. Flights are now coming back. So we have United starting in March, and Delta, and a lot of the American airlines are coming back to Israel. And I'm believing that by this fall, we're going to have people really start coming in 2026. And I really encourage you to come because it's meaningful to be some of the first people that are coming back since the war.
Amen. Yeah, man, I think 2026 is just going to be crazy. Yeah, and even this fall, like you were saying, it's going to be a mad rush. We're starting to see an uptick in people wanting to come and trips just filling up. Well, man, thank you so much for joining the show. God bless you, Vanessa, your family, your team. So good to see you. And for you listening, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. You can find out more, as Michael said, at firm.com. Was it firm.com?
Firm Israel, firmisrael.org.
Firm Israel. And then definitely check out their YouTube. They make some of the greatest street videos I've seen. I've learned more about Jewish history from your videos, so definitely go check those out on their YouTube on their YouTube channel. And thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next Tuesday.